Um, this is our agenda. Talk about financial coaching first, then we're gonna talk about managing creditors, debt collectors, and debt management service providers. We'll end with a little bit of discussion time in smaller groups. And then we are gonna ask you to share ideas for future webinars for you all. What is it that you would like neighborhood partnerships to continue offering as far as sort of short training opportunities during this time. So we have two excellent presenters. Rachel's going to start, but we also have Nancy Ewell, who is with the Department of Business and Consumer Services, and she'll sort of tell you a little bit more about what she does. She also did the part one of this series, and that's recording is available if you missed it. But first, we're going to have Rachel Hall, who is with CASA of Oregon's Innovative Changes. Her work has been sort of long time with Innovative Changes, coaching clients working here in the metro area. And I'll let her tell a little bit more about herself and her work as we go. And so I'll turn it over without anything else to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you for this opportunity for being on this webinar, and thank you to all of the participants. It looks like all 31 of you that have joined us today. I'm Rachel Hall, and I work at CASA of Oregon's Innovative Changes. I have the distinct pleasure of being the Financial Capabilities Manager. So my duties are the Financial Education Program, I oversee that, and also the Financial Coaching Program. And as a lot of you practitioners on the phone know, that those two things kind of go hand in hand. So that is why I'm on this call and going to share my expertise in that area. So I'd like to just go ahead and jump right in, and next slide, and go into our icebreaker. I know that we've all been in the house and quarantined away, and we've had a lot of time to reflect, but we've also had a lot of time to miss out on participating and being a part of some things due to our current situation. So for our icebreaker question, I'd like to know, what is the first place you want to go after quarantine? And you can respond in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to share what your thoughts are about the first place that you want to go to after quarantine. Oh, I see some responses are coming in now. Go to the beach, go to the movies, also go camping. Oh, that's wonderful. These are all things that we have not, hiking, been able to do. Gather with family and friends in Mexico, go to a potluck, go to the coast, see family and go to the coast. Visit family on the East Coast, some travel. Oh, see kids. Oh, that's so sweet. Visit family. Church, go back to church. Yes, family. This time away from or being quarantined has really brought out, go out to eat, has really brought out some things for us to reflect on missing. Isn't that something? I noticed that there's a lot of the responses are around gathering together. I tell you what, that for myself, I have noticed that I have really missed being around people and seeing people. So this has been a very different and hard transition. There are other responses? Restaurants, sit down. Oh yes, being able to commune with our friends and chit chat over some beverages. All right. This is great. Hugging, yes, hugging, and also shaking of the hands. Who would have thought that we would be living in a time where shaking of hands is not something that we do on a regular basis? A lot of the things that we're used to is sure going to change after this. We're going to have to adapt. I appreciate everyone that shared their responses inside of the chat about what they want to do when they first get out of quarantine. We're going to jump right in to talking about debt, But before we talk about debt, we're going to start off with a definition, an understanding of debt, and then we're going to go into some coaching tools around debt. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, great. So, debt is owing money to another person. Go back to what is, thank you. Debt is owing money to another person or financial institution. It's the money that you borrow and yet you're promising to pay back. As you can see in this illustration, the different aspects of borrowing, it really depicts what's happening, why, and what the types are. So the amount is usually grows over time depending on the agreed upon interest rate. While you should always be careful about borrowing money, in some cases, debt can actually help your financial situation and help it to get better for the future. For example, if you can help, many people borrow or take out loans for education, which can help them to get a better job, start up a business, and even investments. Different types of debt really serve different purposes. And taking out debt can actually be a beneficial thing for the long run. But I want to caution you to be careful, however, about taking out too much debt that you possibly can't handle. You want to shop around for interest rates and always plan to pay or also have a plan to pay back the amount of money that you do borrow. Next slide. All right. So how does coaching wrap into talking about debt? So what financial coaching is, it's based on the premise that people are really creative, they're resourceful, and that they're whole. Coaches are not trying to fix individuals, but rather they're research accountability partners, and they're actually there to support people. Coaches aren't the experts. They're not serving they're not serving as financial advisors or telling the coachee what to do with their money. Coachees know what works best for them, and they know what works in their lifestyles. Coaches are non-judgmental on past or future decisions. The premise of the coaches is a relationship that the coaching is a partnership and that the confidentiality will be preserved throughout the relationship based on that trust. Next slide. Okay. Coaching also centers acting accountability and focuses on future goals. Building that trust as a partnership is an important role. The coach and the coachee will try to come up with creative solutions, reassessing long-term goals to figure out what steps are needed to take for upcoming action steps. And the coachee is to complete on their own before the next meeting. The Asset Funders Network financial coaching census in 2016 reported that the average racial and ethnic background of clients that are seeking coaching is 38% Black and African American, 30% white, and 22% Hispanic or Latino. Next slide. There are other designations or professional designations for financial coaching, and those are financial advising and financial educators. So with financial advisors, they advise on estate planning, retirement planning, insurance needs, and personal finance. And then with financial educators, they have a different focus. They advise on financial management, personal finances, helping to better financial decision making. They do not give financial advice like investments. So you want to be really careful and just kind of notice the difference between these roles and be careful not to step into the realm of advising, because there are professionals that can do that. Next slide. Okay. So with financial coaching, one of the key components is being able to start the conversation. In this slide here, we're going to talk about how powerful questions can aid in that. So powerful questions is not really about the quality of the question, but that it's also based on the complexity. So the complexity excuse me, the quality of the question is not judged by its complexity, but by the complexity of the thinking actually that it provokes. So next to listening, use of powerful questions is a skill that coaches can use. There are questions that support the framework of the coaching conversation, and there's questions that support the client's ideals of their own mental and emotional being. So notice here that the clarifying the client's outcome question could be something to the effect of, what is the desired outcome? Another question could be, what results do you want? Under the question for aiding the clients moving from current reality to desired reality, a question could be, what tools do you need to help you? Another could be, how can you turn this around? So in the one for challenging ways that clients perceive a situation, here's 3 questions that you could potentially use. What are you holding as true that may not be true? What would you try if you could do it, if you knew that you could not fail? And then think about what's funny about this, or what is good about this, or great about this. Some questions under challenge the client's state of mind. A question could be, how can you notice all of the ways in which you're growing and developing from this assignment? Under capture the thinking, a question could be, looking back now, what did you learn? And another question could be, how will you practice these skills in another lifestyle or life setting? And under the last one of offering encouragement and support, 2 questions could be, what could I do to help support you in this? And what am I doing that is actually helpful? So list powerful question examples. The examples are what I'm talking about underneath offering encouragement and support. A question could be for the coach to actually offer that support would be, what can I support you in this? That is the powerful question example.
And Rachel, are you willing to share those questions? Can we
Absolutely.
send them out afterwards with the slides? Those
Absolutely.
that you provided? Great.
Yes, yes. I plan to send the supporting document for this. Because these are just a sample of what the powerful questions could be underneath these 5 bullet points. I have like 10 questions under each bullet point that I'll be happy to share after this, absolutely. Okay, next slide. It's really important to have a model to use, and this is an example of a coaching model to actually aid in conversation. Why this topic is important is it is a model that shows coaching conversation that can be easily implemented right away. This framework logically walks through the aspect of coaching conversations so that the client can also come to the knowledge of the next steps, which is really important, that the client is driving this. Using the model creates a better understanding of the coaching process and a strong partnership and a higher level of trust as it minimizes the introduction of too many unknowns. This model integrates the fundamentals of coaching, which is action, accountability, and goal-focused. So 5 basic questions are, what you see here on the slide is coaching. Underneath competency, a question could be, what's going well, what's working? And also you want to look for those celebratory opportunities. So you want to test what the client already knows. And then under O, under outcomes, a question is, what is the focus for our time today? Again, letting the client drive what the time together will be, and then also what the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. A is for action steps. And the action step is, with this information, what's next? Just that simple. And under CH is a checking in. A question could be, what are you doing to do this? And when are you going to do it by? And how will you know that it's done? See how that provokes like that checking in and that self-assessment there? The purpose of this is to provoke deep thinking and reflection. Also, it helps for clarity. Providing framework also goes through the coaching conversation and the powerful question guides in the conversation. Next slide. All right. And then we can also talk about conversation without incorporating SMART goals. And I'm sure that this group is very familiar with SMART goals, being specific, measurable, attainable, and also realistic. But I want to introduce and talk about the next step to SMART goals. And that is making a goal that has been stated exactly what needs to be done and taking it to a smarter goal. Next slide, please. Why this topic is important is because while SMART goals is a standard for how you write out an effective goal that is clearly understood by anyone who is hearing it, the smarter goal plan is a plan, however, that will help you to achieve the goal. If you cannot explain why the goal is important, then throw it out. Okay. It could be someone else's goal for you. It's important that you then get energy around the goal to help sustain it, and it allows for a fair chance to be able to achieve the goal. Some key points to the smarter goals is the SMART goal plan is a process of living out the goal. The plan supports the action piece to the coaching model. So strategize, think of the actions that can be taken, activate activities that can encourage you to move towards achieving your goal, know what the barriers are, anticipate them, and then prepare on conquering them. Ask for help and also accept it and hold yourself accountable and get a buddy. Okay. Where you are now today in your life is not where you're going to be 1 month from now. So be ready to keep the goal alive and revise it as you need to and track your progress. And also small wins are necessary to keep yourself motivated and moving towards goal completion, and evaluate the success of the goal and how did you finish it and what the wins are. And then under reward, know what it is and know what this will be before you start it. Envision completing the goal is the first step to actually being able to achieve it. Next slide. Okay, some potential trainings around financial coaching or accreditations are the accredited financial coaching or counseling. This is a certification that yourself as practitioners or incoming staff can get certified in coaching. And then Financial Coaching Academy is an online curriculum that can be used to promote and help you with financial coaching at your organizations. And also Innovative Changes has financial coach trainings. So we train practitioners and also volunteers that want to be paired up with coaches or coachees, and we do that training 4 times a year. There's also the National Coaching Council for Financial Coaching certification that practitioners can get certified in coaching. Next slide. In terms of materials and tools, FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, has Money Smarts for adults that can be used. They also come out once a year and do an actual in-person training for their tools that are free to be able to use. And I also encourage you to use the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They have resources and handouts that you can download and use right away within your coaching sessions. And they have different topics that can be utilized in videos to be able to assist you. And then there's also the Financial Coaching Volunteer Resources. So these are just some tools that can be used for coaching clients around debt. And at this time, I would like to turn it over into the capable hands of Nancy Ewell. Nancy, take it over.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Luke. I'm really happy to be here. And that was great information. I definitely learned a lot. I'm Nancy Ewell. I'm a Financial Education Outreach Coordinator with the Oregon Division of Financial Regulation. And I've had the pleasure of working with Neighborhood Partnerships and the IDA network in the past. So I'm really a big fan of the work you do to build people's financial capabilities and to build wealth. So thank you for that great work. I'm going to start with a quick introduction about the Division of Financial Regulation. So Luke, if you could go to the next slide, please. So the division is part of the Department of Consumer and Business Services. And the mission is to really help Oregonians to access fair products and services. So this is a summary list of the types of businesses in Oregon that we license and then regulate. And during the time of COVID-19, we're doing a lot to help consumers. So I would encourage you to go to our website. We have a whole section on COVID-19 FAQs that will help you and supporting your consumers and your clients and seeing what we're doing to provide that kind of support. Next slide, please. A big part of our work is consumer advocacy. We have a highly experienced team of consumer advocates who can help you with problems or questions, concerns, or contract issues pertaining to insurance and financial service professionals that we regulate. So if you're not sure if a complaint is the way to go, or you just need advice, or you have a general question, you can call or email the team and they'll be happy to help you. Our advocates can also tell you if an agent or a company is licensed in Oregon, and we can give you their complaint history. Today we're going to talk about managing credit, and it's an industry that does have some bad players, and action against unscrupulous players often start with a consumer calling an advocate. One of our investigators recently got a debt management service provider to refund over $7,000 in bogus fees to an Oregon consumer. We do track those complaints, and you can call us to check on a financial service provider before you start working with them. So this morning, I'm going to talk about dealing with consumer creditors, with credit card companies, and I'll talk a bit about dealing with debt collection, debt management service providers, and touch on some ideas about emergency loans. So next slide, please. I really want to echo what Rachel Hall was highlighting about coaching and advocacy and agency. These points really have to do with a person being in charge of their decisions about what to do about their debt. As a coach, you can give them information, you can ask powerful questions to help them think it through. So this information I'm providing you with is to help you with that. So a couple of points for dealing with, helping your clients when they're dealing with creditors is absolutely encourage them to be active, be proactive, to reach out and communicate early. You want them to set their mind on success. During this coronavirus pandemic, many lenders have agreed to help their customers by allowing for delays in payments, and those delays are called forbearance. They've also allowed to lower monthly fees, to waive late fees, or lower interest rates, and those kinds of agreements are called modifications or accommodations. Now, I know that someone, when they registered, asked a question, how does that impact someone's credit in credit reporting? So because of the CARES Act, lenders have been told that if a loan is current before COVID-19 and someone goes into a modification or a forbearance, the lender is to continue to report that loan as current for the time being. Therefore, the credit scoring companies will not reduce the score for someone if their loan was current, then they go into a modification during the COVID period. Their score will not be negatively impacted. Now, I want to put a caveat on that because we know credit score is not the only thing that's taken into account. And we are hearing about lenders, when reviewing someone's credit report, looking derogatorily on a loan that's in modification or forbearance. So in other words, the score may not be negatively impacted, but a lender may perceive it as a credit risk. So the lesson to be learned is if you need the modification or the forbearance, use it. But if you don't really need it, don't take advantage of it. Stay making those current payments. And if you are in a modification or a forbearance, get back into the payment track as quickly as you can. The other important step when dealing with creditors is to really know all of your debts, do a good inventory, know what the terms are, know the amounts owed, know your budget, be very honest about what your expenses are and what you can do. And with that, you can prepare for what you want to ask your creditor to do. Script it out, practice it, visualize success. If in the first time you call that creditor, they don't agree to your proposal, hang up, call back, talk to another person at that creditor. They may be willing to negotiate with you. Be consistent when you get to an agreement, stick to the plan, stay in touch. If you have a new problem come up, let them know. The worst thing for them is to not know what's going on for you. So be in touch with them and know that they want you to be successful too. Next slide, please. In addition to negotiating with the creditor, you also need some practical strategies to actually tackle the debt. I do want to touch on the management of credit cards. I think it's important, if possible, during this time of economic decline, that people should try to get their balances down on their credit card to have more credit available on their credit card. If at all possible, you could be able to use that credit card available balance in the future if an emergency comes up. So I would say prioritize chipping away at that outstanding balance if that's possible. I know one of the people when registering asked about someone had a client whose spouse had taken out a credit card in their name and now they're getting divorced and they never knew about that credit card. They wanted to know if they could dispute that. It really depends on the situation. I would encourage that client to call the credit card company and talk it through with them. At a minimum, they should tell the credit card company to stop any charges, that their name should not be on that credit card. But that client should probably also work with a lawyer to protect themselves from that liability. A couple of simple techniques for dealing with credit and your debt and getting it in front of you is the snowball method. The idea is that you line up all of your debts and you make minimum payments on all of them, but you put some extra payments on the smallest balance first. You get that one paid off, you cross it off the list, and you move on to the next one. So you're shrinking the list of debt, and it's a very empowering feeling. The notion is, I can do this. You then start tackling bigger and bigger debts. The avalanche method is you line out your debts based on either the higher interest rates or the highest balance, and you target that one first. So make your minimum payments on all your debts, but you really put extra funds towards the one with the higher interest rate or the higher balance. Pay it down. When it's finished, you apply that payment to your next debt on the list. And let me tell you, there's no wrong way. It's about the right way is the way that works for you. Debt is a very emotional thing for many people. So I would say pick the debt that bothers you the most and tackle it. And you can say good riddance to it and move on to the next. I also encourage people to get reputable help. So Rachel did a great talk about working with coaches. I really encourage people to work with financial coaches. They can also work with nonprofit certified credit counselors. And in the notes of this slide, you'll find a link from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau about how to ask the right questions when you're getting into a relationship with a nonprofit certified credit counselor to make sure that they can serve you well. I would also encourage people, if they're thinking, how do I know if bankruptcy is right for me? Again, they should work probably with a credit counselor, but also work with a lawyer. And in the link, there is a link to the Oregon State Bar to find a lawyer who could help someone think through if bankruptcy is right for them. Next slide, please. Now, folks who were able to be with us in May remember this information, which is that we know financial fraud disproportionately impacts African Americans and the Hispanic community. So debt-related fraud is extremely prevalent in the African American community. They are 300% more likely, or 3 times as likely, to be victims of debt-related fraud, and our Hispanic community is 2.5 times as likely. So I'm going to talk a bit about debt relief programs and illegal debt collection programs, and I really want to encourage you again to have people report when they are victims of debt-related fraud. Remember that $7,000 settlement that I talked about earlier? That was because somebody reported it. It really does make a difference. So I encourage you, make sure your folks are reporting to us, to the Oregon Department of Justice, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Consumer Financial Protection Agency. And if folks didn't get to hear the financial fraud seminar from May, Luke can send you that recording. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about debt collectors. So debt collectors could work in-house for a creditor. They may be on contract with a creditor, or they may be someone who bought the debt outright. So all of that is to say, dealing with debt collectors is very similar to dealing with your primary creditor, except for 3 important points. The borrower is not trying to keep a long-term relationship with the debt collector, right? They just want to get that person out of their life. Also, the creditor may have charged off the loan already. And finally, that debt collector may have paid a very small amount of the face value for that debt. So as troubling as that is for many people, I would say use those points and pivot them to your strengths. In other words, you can approach debt collectors with a bit more assertive strategy than you might for a long-term creditor. So Luke, if you could hit the button one more time, I think some more information will come up on that slide. Thank you. So it's important to know that this is a pretty pervasive activity in Oregon. Our courts were really full of cases of debt buyers suing and winning against Oregon clients. We could see in a 3-year period over 19,000 lawsuits. They didn't even have to prove their cases, and the average judgment there is $3,000. The link to the report from the Center for Responsible Lending is in the notes page of this slide deck, and you can have the slide deck afterwards. Similarly, Prosperity Now scorecard tells us that 1 out of every 6 Oregonians have debt in collections, and 11% of Oregonians have debt that's severely delinquent. Now, bear in mind, this is 2018. This is even pre-COVID. So that is all to say this is a very pervasive problem, and we need to talk about it and be ready to help people about it. Next slide, please. The good news is there is a federal law, and Oregon has laws to protect people from unscrupulous debt collection practices. So the first thing people should know if they're dealing with a debt collector is they should make sure that they are legitimate. And they are legitimate if they're licensed with us. So call us, email us, check our website. Is that debt collector even licensed to work in Oregon? The second thing you want to check is the debt legitimate? Debt collectors have to document to you that that debt is really yours. And in the notes page of this slide is a link to the sample letter from the CFPB that you would send to a debt collector that says, prove to me that debt is mine. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau reports that for Oregonians, after complaints about mortgages, debt collectors are the next most frequent complaint. And the complaint is, this debt is not mine. So they have to prove that that debt is actually yours. The other thing, debt collectors cannot harass you, so they cannot call you before 8 in the morning or after 9 p.m., and you can report them to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau or the Oregon Department of Justice if they're harassing you. Next slide, please. If you tell them not to call you at work, they cannot continue to call you at work. If you're working with an attorney, they're to talk to that attorney only, not to bother you. And if you tell a debt collector to stop communicating with you in writing, they must do so. Now, the caveat is they won't necessarily stop their work. They may continue to sue you for judgment and get garnishment. So you really want to decide whether or not you want to just have them stop communicating with you or if you actually want to deal with them. Now, someone asked about people being judgment-proof. Someone is judgment-proof if they have no assets, no savings, no property, and their only source of income is Social Security. So in that case, telling someone, a debt collector, to stop communicating with you would be fine because that person is judgment-proof. But for the rest of folks, you may want to just resolve the issue rather than end up with a judgment that they can then use to garnish. Next slide, please. So if someone's dealing with a debt collector and you get sued, don't ignore it. Try to get a lawyer, work with the Oregon Bar to find a lawyer, and do show up to defend yourself. This is after making sure, again, that that debt is yours. And then know the age of your debt. Or if it's a judgment, know the age of your judgment. So there's something in Oregon called the statute of limitations. So if you have debt that you have not made a payment on for 6 years, the statute of limitation has expired and you are not responsible for that debt anymore. So if a debt collector contacts you in the 5th year and the 11th month since you've made a payment, you and your lawyer may decide a strategy for dealing with that doesn't involve making a payment. If you make a payment, the clock starts ticking again. You see, you're back at day 0. Similarly, with judgments, the statute of limitations is 10 years from the last payment made. So know the age of your debt if you're dealing with a debt collector. If you know the debt is yours and you're going to deal with it, make a plan, accumulate a lump sum payment or partial payments, and much like a creditor, decide what you want to do, script it out, practice it, visualize success, and keep trying. Next slide, please. Once you have an agreement with them, make sure it's in writing before you send them any money. Pay according to the agreement, and then check your credit reports to make sure that they've settled it in full. Okay, so let's say your client's not dealing with a debt collector, but they are tremendously stressed by their debt load, and they tell you they want to use one of those debt management service providers that you see advertised on late night TV. So how do you help them make a good decision about working with debt management service providers? Next slide, please. So here's some tips when you're talking through with your clients about it. These are things folks should know before they sign up an agreement. The first is, actually, let me start by saying a debt management service provider are sometimes called debt relief companies or debt settlement companies or debt adjustment companies. And what they're saying is that they can renegotiate, reduce, or settle in some way or change the terms of your debt. So that's sort of the broad industry. So it's important to know if your client thinks they want to work with them, they should shop around and ask questions. If they ever feel pressured to sign up, that's probably a problem. If the debt management service provider is promising pennies on the dollar in settlement, that's probably a problem. It's not realistic. They're not allowed to charge upfront fees, and they should never tell you to stop communicating with your creditor or to lie to your creditor. So shop around, ask questions, and make sure that you're getting, I'm just looking at the question. For the age of the debt and judgment, debt given judgment within 10 years last payment. Judgment, so the judgment is 10 years of the last payment. Thanks, Nate. And in the slides, I have actually a reference to the law, so you can read through that. So it's as of the last payment. The second thing to think about with the debt management service provider is your particular debts. In other words, many credit card companies will not negotiate with a debt management service provider, and many student loans are not, do not qualify for being negotiated with debt management service providers. So you should make sure that your debts can even benefit from working with a debt management service provider. And then you really want to think about, is this the best use of your money? So the way the debt management service providers work is that they have the customer accumulate monthly payments in a bank account, not to pay the creditors, but accumulate these monthly payments into a bank account and pay a monthly fee to the debt management service providers, while the debt management service provider waits for enough money to be accumulated to then negotiate with the creditor. So your creditor is not getting paid. They may be adding fees to the debt. They're reporting in a negative way to the credit reporting companies, and eventually they're pretty frustrated with the debt. They may be willing to negotiate with the debt management service provider, but was that the best use of your money? That's just the kind of question you might want to ask with your clients. Make sure the company is registered to operate in Oregon. Again, you can reach out to our division about that. Make sure that they clearly spell out the beneficial services. Why will this be helpful to the customer? They have to do a budget with the customer based on the customer's finances that makes sense and is realistic, and they have to clearly spell out the fees. All of that must be in writing, even if the debt management service provider is internet-based. Next slide, please. Over the years, we've had some problems with debt management service providers. We found a few red flags, both in Oregon and nationally. And the first is that advance fees are not allowed. So somebody during registration asked about mortgage relief products that were saying that if you pay in advance, they will give you mortgage relief. That is against the law. Advance fees are not allowed. They may only earn their fees when they've actually done something beneficial for the customer. They also can only earn their fees proportionally. So if they help to settle 50% of your debts that's under contract with them, they can only earn 50% of the settlement fee. And the reason for that is unscrupulous debt management service providers would like maybe settling one debt and grabbing the fee for the entire contract. That is not allowed. It's also important to know that when people get debt relief, it is perceived as income by the IRS, and so there may be a tax liability for that, so the customer really needs to understand that impact. There's a service they offer called forensic audits, which are basically bogus. They say they're going to look at your mortgage documents for you and find errors and negotiate a reduction in terms for you with your mortgage lender. That's not a true service. And then you should always check our website or ask our advocacy staff about any complaints or orders against debt management service providers. Next slide, please. This is an example of on our website. You can literally look up the orders, and they are so much fun to read. Let's go to the next slide. You'll see what's in one of these. So this is an example of a consent order that we took against a debt management service provider that was offering student loan relief. And you can see that over a 3-year period, they helped 36, well, they charged fees to 36 Oregonians, and they earned $30,000 in fees to purportedly help them with Department of Education programs on student loan management. So that gives you an idea of the kind of work they're doing. Next slide, please. Student loan debt relief is a big problem now. There's a lot of scammers out there. The Department of Education has a lot of good information about avoiding them. A lot of people pretend to be the Department of Education and are offering these programs, and they are not. So go to the Department of Education website for more information. This is the Federal Department of Education. Many student loan debt relief scams are for agencies that are not licensed in Oregon. Again, they must be licensed in Oregon. They're charging upfront fees, which is illegal in Oregon, and they're taking people's federal student assistance ID and stealing their personal ID, personal information from that. And just bear in mind that most student loans cannot be forgiven. So even working with a debt relief service provider on student loans may not get somebody very far ahead. Joanne is asking about collectors filing judgment. It's not on judgment, so sorry, that was confusing. So if someone's debt has not been, if someone has not paid their debt for over 6 years, for 6 years or longer, then the statute of limitation has expired on that. A judgment, it's 10 years on a judgment. If a collector doesn't file a judgment. That's right. So if a collector doesn't file a judgment 6.5 years after the last payment, they no longer can. That's correct. The statute of limitation is in your favor. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just so you know a little bit about the kinds of fees they are allowed to charge in debt settlements. They can do a $100 initial fee for counseling and education. That is proportional to 15% of the debt under management, not to exceed $65 a month. And that's the Oregon law. So we cap how much they can charge you in Oregon to $65 a month. And then if they're doing a percentage, if they're doing a contingency fee style, which is more common with a mortgage short sale, so a one-time reduction in someone's debt, they would do a contingency fee style, and they can charge you 7.5% of the amount of debt that was reduced. So if they reduce your debt by $10,000, they can earn 7.5% of that debt. That's a one-time contingency fee kind of a charge. Next slide, please. This is an example. I'm not going to run you folks through it, but it's there for you if you like to learn by running through numbers. Again, once you get the slide deck, you can work that through and see. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me or email me, and I can walk you through it. But it just helps to get your head around what it would cost someone to work with a debt management service provider. So we can, as I say, I'm happy to talk you through that one-on-one just feel free to call me. My phone number is at the end of this PowerPoint. Next slide, please. Here's a good reference from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that compares working with a credit counseling service versus a debt settlement company. The link to that for the CFPB is in the notes page, but it just helps you, again, working with your client, which would be better for them and what's the outcome, and really think again about what is the impact on their credit score, on credit reporting if they're working with a debt settlement company. Okay, next slide, please. So the other kind of service that debt management service companies offer is debt consolidation. So if you have a client who's literally paralyzed by large amounts of debt, then they may benefit from working with a debt consolidation company that the client pays one company and that company then pays all the creditors. Sometimes the debt consolidation company can get maybe a longer term, so the monthly payments are lower. Sometimes they can lower the interest rate. And this is one of the services that some nonprofit credit counseling agencies do offer. The fee for this is typically 15% of the monthly payment that you're giving to the debt management service provider for onward payment to your creditors. Next slide, please. And this is another example of what that would look like cost-wise. Someone's got 8 credit accounts. The consolidator is going to help them pay those all off. They're going to pay that consolidator either 15% or $65 per month maximum, whichever is lower. And so over 5 years, they're paying close to $4,000 for that service. So then you just ask yourself, could that client have done this themselves, or maybe with some help of a coach who's helping them stay accountable to it, or maybe they need the debt consolidation company's service. Next slide, please. I'm just going to touch briefly on payday loans and car title loans. Again, we do regulate those in Oregon. And so we know that they're pretty pervasive. Those who are legitimate report to us. So in 2018, over 354,000 payday loans were made in Oregon, and that was for a value of $101 million. So it is an industry that is here. It has declined a little bit over the years, but not that much. So clearly it is still being used by a lot of folks. Next slide, please. And just so you know, we have very clear regulation on payday loans and car title loans. The regulations are the same for both payday loans and car title loans. We have limits on the length of the loan and whatnot. The interest rate, the fees, there's only a one-time origination fee. There has to be a cooling off period between one loan and the next. Next slide, please. This, again, is an example of what it looks like, what someone pays for a payday loan. And I think I would just focus to the 5th line that says, in total, this consumer paid $57.51 to use $300 for 3 months. So I think that's really where we think about, golly, that's a pretty expensive thing to pay for a small amount of money over a period of time. Next slide, please. So here are just some ideas. Again, if you're working with a client, you might want to ask them these questions before they take out a payday loan or a car title loan. Have they really exhausted all other avenues as it relates to asking friends, family, and employers for help? Can they possibly sell something or get their tax refund or do some gig work? If they have a bank account, banks and credit unions are increasingly putting out small personal loans or credit cards at much better terms than a payday loan. If it is a current credit that's really stressing them out, a current debt, can they negotiate with that creditor on that current debt to ease up on their cash flow? And then, of course, calling 211-INFO may generate resources. So, for example, if you could find some food banks that would help someone reduce their grocery budget, then they may be able to find some more cash flow that way. So I think that's the final part of my presentation. And I'm just curious if folks have other suggestions you have for your clients when they think about using a payday loan or a car title loan. Okay, Tara's got a good comment. She says, a client of mine was involved in a multi-level marketing scam masquerading as a credit repair company. Yeah, financial education services is one of the ones. Yep. So you did a great job going to the Better Business Bureau, right? So you can see that. You could also call us, but Better Business Bureau is fabulous. Yeah, so there's a lot of scams. I didn't talk at all about credit repair. All I will say about credit repair companies are they can't fix anything on your credit report that's accurate. So if there's negative information on your credit report, but it's accurate, they can't change that. So anything a credit repair company can do, a person can do for free. So that's, I think, all I want to say about that. Okay, so Luke, you want to have us do some discussion?
Yeah, I think I'll maybe walk us through the last couple things, and then we'll finish with discussion, and people can drop off when they need to go in case we run past noon. So we'll come back to these questions, but we really want to hopefully connect the dots with you all, being in a unique position where people might be coming to you, really help you think about how do you engage clients, to open up the conversations, to let them set their goals, and then to bring in some information and education that then can guide their self-advocacy. So really just wanted to think about how do we bring the information that we know to be true to a client who is in a place where they're at risk of making uninformed decisions. So we'll come back to some discussion questions. First, I think we're gonna have you all give us answers to just a quick evaluation poll. So you should see a couple questions pop up in front of you. We'd like to know how likely you are to apply something you learned today about coaching and credit management to your work with clients or in your personal life, as well as when your clients have a question or complaint about insurance, financial service providers, or investment scams, how likely are you to tell your clients about the consumer hotline for insurance services? So if you could give us your thoughts on those two questions. And then as people are responding, Nancy, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about the upcoming Scam Jam?
Sure, thank you, Luke. So next Tuesday, the 23rd, the Oregon AARP, Oregon Department of Justice, and the Department of Consumer and Business Services are hosting a live virtual Scam Jam. And so you can sign on from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and learn about scams that are going on in Oregon. Yes, we do have a Spanish option. Thank you for asking that. You can learn about scams, you can ask questions, you can share ideas. So it's next Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. It's Oregon-specific AARP, Department of Justice, and our division, Department of Consumer and Business Services. And so it's a great opportunity to really engage in this topic. And Luke is going to send you folks the link to register for that. It is free. And I encourage you to put it into your e-newsletters and your email blast to your clients also, so that they can get on to that and learn about the scams in Oregon.
All right, so here's our survey results. Just a lot of appreciation for Rachel and Nancy for bringing their experience and their expertise here to our conversation. I'm gonna go ahead and bring us back to, the discussion question. So I don't think I'll break us into groups because people may be dropping off as you need to. But people can either share by unmuting and sharing with the group, or in the comment section again about these two questions, as well as before some of you leave, we also want to know, and if you can just put these in the comments as well so that we can capture them for review later. What coaching resources and tools do you use now? And what other training topics do you want to attend in the future? So if you use a tool that you think is excellent, we'd love to know about it and how it's working for you. And then secondly, what, just generally speaking, what other training topics would you like neighborhood partnerships to organize for staff of the IDA initiative as we continue to hopefully piece together some professionals that are experienced in these topics to bring information that may be helpful in the work you all do. So again, those two can go in the comments before you sign off. And then we'll go back to the discussion question. So does anybody have a sort of reflection on where they see debt management coming into discussions or tools and resources that you lack confidence in when coaching clients around debt management? So Ross shared powerpay.org is a great tool to visually show a client how a debt snowball avalanche work. Thanks, Ross, that's great. So definitely pointing people to online calculations where they can see the true cost. I think the examples of like a payday loan and they see the fees helps them balance the decision, right? To think about how do they want to move forward, knowing the options that are available.
I had a question if no one else is chomping at the bit.
Go for it.
I'm currently I'm spending a lot of my time working with one specific client who's dealing with a lot of debt issues that he just became aware of when we pulled his credit. And I've kind of talked with Nate at Dev Northwest about this in passing, but I'm not sure what his options are. And I've been talking to him about speaking to a financial counselor or an asset building specialist at Dev Northwest, but I don't know what his options are if the person that he was married to at the time opened up massive amounts of credit and it's now in bad standing in his name. Does anybody know if he has any options about disputing or anything like that when it was opened and accumulated by somebody he was married to? It's kind of a unique situation, but I'm just curious if anybody has any ideas.
I don't specifically, but it does, I think the question does touch on the challenge of certain things being legal issues and other things being, the rights of an individual. And yeah, I would guess that falls more into a legal arena, but I'll let anybody else speak to that might have experience working.
Okay, thank you, Joanne.
That is a unique situation. I don't normally work with that, or have I encountered that? But what I was thinking about, because it is a legal issue, is try to figure out if there are free legal consultations that services in your area that the client can talk to a lawyer to see what the options are and explore those. Sometimes there's lawyers that will waive the consultation fee, in hopes of taking on the case type of a thing. But that's just a suggestion that I would offer in how to tackle that.
Okay, thank you so much, Rachel.
Yeah, this is Nancy. I would just add 2 tips to that. I agree that if they can get legal assistance, that's the best thing. I also would encourage them to contact every single one of those creditors and tell them that it was done without their knowledge, so that if it's a credit card particularly, the charges can stop. And then also, I would look at resources around that are provided by agencies that support survivors of domestic violence, because this does happen. It's one aspect of the financial exploitation in that kind of a relationship. And I'm not saying your client is a survivor, but the tools are similar in looking at how to unwind finances when a relationship is no longer in existence. And so I agree, try to get a lawyer, let the creditors know, but then also look at some of those financial resources that are provided by agencies that support survivors of domestic violence in the financial realm.
Thank you so much. I will work with him to look into those resources. And if anybody has any suggestions about how to find a lawyer specific to this in Lane County, I'm all ears, or my ears are open, or whatever that saying is.
Yeah, so it sounds like a couple ideas: Oregon State Bar, modest means panel, or an employee assistance program, EAP benefit that they may have from an employer. And then Rebecca, I'll just share her statement here in the chat. My current position, I refer clients to consumer credit counseling and to our housing counselors here when they have debt questions. However, I am allowed to discuss various scams that are out there. I do want to use these tools in the future if the capacity of my position changes or if I get a promotion. As for future trainings, I would love to hear more about this topic with some examples. Yeah, housing field, especially, I think there's overlap, and I think people, Nancy, do you want to speak at all to the work that Fernando does and others more related to the housing side in your department?
Sure, thanks, Luke, I appreciate that. So Fernando Velez, many of you know, he is our homeowner preservation specialist. And so he is available to help folks who are particularly working with homeowners who are looking to avoid foreclosure. And he's tracking on the federal legislation, and he's currently in the process of doing quite a few webinars for partners. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out to myself or Fernando. I can forward your contact to him to get up-to-date information about foreclosure prevention services, really understanding modifications. And we also regulate mortgage servicers. And so if people are having problems with mortgage servicers, they can, again, use our advocates for complaints and questions, but also Fernando can do training on how to work well with a mortgage servicer.
Great, thank you. So again, add in the chat ideas you have for future webinars or trainings that you would like to see provided, and we'll do our best to coordinate the people that might serve to give information that's helpful for you all in the work that you're doing. Any last thoughts before we wrap up and say goodbye? I think we're a little bit over time, so appreciate everybody, and again, Rachel and Nancy for their wisdom and insights. And we will send a link of this recording as well as the PowerPoint, and you all can use it to your benefit for the work that you're doing with clients.